Hi guys, this is Raju Rahman from Tectonic. In today's video I'll be taking a look at another Bluetooth gaming controller called the SHAKS S5i. This supports Windows, Mac, iOS and Android, so a whole host of different platforms. Of course I'll be testing it mainly with Android as that's what I use. If this looks interesting, keep watching to find out more. The SHAKS S5i is currently on Kickstarter, but it surpassed its funding goal. It's expected to ship in February with an MSRP of €70. Here's the box for the SHAKS S5i. It doesn't look particularly eye-catching, but SHAKS does make it clear that they're using this eco-friendly 100% recycled cardboard with vegetable ink prints. Didn't even know that was a thing until now. So let's get this thing open. It's not shrink wrapped, so it makes it easy to take everything apart. First thing you'll see is the leather soft pouch with the SHAKS branding here on the top left. I find myself never using pouches like this, but unlike me, if you care about protecting your stuff during travel, then you'll appreciate it being included. Next, you have a USB-A to USB-C charging cable. You guys will know I'm a fan of USB-C, as everyone should be, so it's good to see that's what's been included here. A quick start guide which you might want to read. Not sure what this is as it's not in English, but judging by the QR codes I suspect it has something to do with the SHAKS application. Finally, a circular D-pad to switch out the cross-shaped D-pad depending on what you prefer using. So going back to the pouch and pulling the zipper open, we have the controller itself. It looks and feels surprisingly premium. The controller itself is reminiscent of an Xbox controller with its asymmetrical design and coloured face buttons. So this is a telescopic spring-loaded controller, but unlike all the other telescopic controllers I've reviewed, there's no big gap in the middle when it's closed. You can see that gap here on the Setaki 707X and even the more expensive Glad Play. Without the gap, it does look like a normal controller with all the buttons spread out very evenly. The whole controller appears to be very ergonomically designed. It feels really easy to hold and the grips are covered in soft rubber, so the controller doesn't slip out your hands so easily. The controller itself is very small. Width-wise, it's even smaller than the FlyDiggy Wii 2T. The overall dimensions are 134 by 92.5 by 33 millimeters. It's also relatively lightweight, weighing only 164 grams. On the top of the controller, you've got dual shoulder buttons, LB and RB, LT and RT. These triggers are analog. It's not something you see on most Bluetooth controllers, so having it here is great. It means you have great control over acceleration and braking. It makes it that much more fun playing racing games. There's also a USB-C port right here on the top. Around the front, you've got the asymmetrical analog sticks, both of which you can push down, so that's L3 and R3. A full-size cross-shaped D-pad with a pivot point in the middle. Doesn't feel mushy, feels very tactile. Of course, if you prefer, you can switch this out for the included circular D-pad. It does take a little effort to take it off, but that's fine as you wouldn't want it to come off while you're gaming. Here you have the select and function buttons. Above that, the LED status lights, which will show you what mode you're in, and the battery levels. If your battery is low, the first LED will blink fast. Whilst charging, it will blink slowly, and when it's fully charged, it will stay solid. Here you have the power and start buttons, back button, home, and 4 more face buttons, X, Y, A, and B. Around the bottom, there's a pairing button. Around the back you have a reset button, and finally on the left side there's a slider to switch between different modes: Android, Windows, iOS, mapping mode, etc. It does feel a little small, but it does what it's supposed to do. And finally, something I've never seen before on a Bluetooth controller, or at least on the controllers I've reviewed so far, you have dual vibration motors, each situated inside the handle or grip. Because of the haptic feedback, you should have a better gaming experience, but we'll see how well it performs later on in the review. There's plenty of rubber padding in all the right places, so rest assured your phone won't get scratched or damaged during usage. If I didn't trust it, I wouldn't be putting my Galaxy Z Fold 2 into this controller. All the buttons on the controller are very clicky and tactile, so they feel great. I've got to say the D-pad feels exceptionally good. It hasn't got any sharp edges, which makes it ideal for beat 'em ups. I can pull off special moves all day with this D-pad without getting blisters, and pulling off those special moves becomes even more easier and gentle on your thumb with the circular D-pad. I personally find that when you play a game where you have to press the directional buttons to select things or go through menus, the cross D-pad tends to work better. But if you're playing something where you move from one direction to another without lifting your thumb, thumb, like here in this game, then the circular D-pad works better. Of course, your preference might be different. Anyways, let's get this controller set up. So this telescopic controller extends out to hold any phone with a max 165mm in length and max 10mm in width. Although on paper it says max 165mm, that's a little conservative. I can just about, with obviously some effort and forcefulness, get my Sony Xperia 1 in there with its 167mm length, but obviously don't try and push it beyond that or you might break the controller. I'll mainly be testing this controller with the Xperia 1 and with my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 2 with its length of 159.2mm. You can see it fits perfectly. So let's get this controller connected. Move the slider to Android mode on the side, then turn on the controller by pressing the power button. You can see the second and third LEDs flashing rapidly. That means it's in pairing mode, but if it isn't, simply press the pairing button at the bottom for more than 1 second to put it into pairing mode. On your phone, go to Bluetooth settings, make sure Bluetooth is enabled, scroll down to under available devices and look for SHAKS S5i 8991 Android and tap on that. Tap OK to accept the request and that's it. The second and third LEDs turn off, the fourth and fifth LEDs light up. That means the connection is complete. You can see I can navigate the Android operating system using the controller, which means it's in X input mode. I normally use X input mode to play games and emulators that support controllers natively without the use of additional software. Asphalt 9 is an example of a game that supports controllers natively without any additional software, but Asphalt 9 isn't a game that really benefits from the use of a controller. In X input mode, the controller will of course support game streaming services. Here I'm playing GTA 5 on my PS4. The controller works really well. Man, GTA will never get old. You might be wondering how I'm using, this third-party controller with PS Remote Play. Well, that's because I'm not using PS Remote Play. This is PS Play, which actually lets you use most third-party Bluetooth controllers. The most important thing for me in a controller are the analog sticks. I've used some that are really bad, like the ones on the Sataki 7007X. The ones on the FlyDigi 2T are decent, and the analog sticks on the Glatt Play are the best I've used. So where does the SHAKS S5i sit in terms of accuracy, I hear you ask? Well, as you can see from the axis test, it's certainly much better than the 7007X. There's not much dead zone, but there's still some bias towards the 4 directions. When I try and draw out a spiral, it seems to hesitate a little when I try and move into the diagonal directions, but otherwise it doesn't seem too bad. So how does this translate to actual in-game usage? Well, not bad. It's not as precise as the Glatt Play, it's definitely better than the Starkey 7007X. I would say it's on par with the FlyDigi V2T, which is still pretty good. The sticks also provide a good amount of resistance, so they don't feel loose or flimsy. It's a real joy to use. As I mentioned earlier, in X input mode this controller works with various game streaming services like Xbox Game Pass, PS Play, Stadia, Geforce Now and Steam Link. It works really well with all these services. The face buttons on this controller are exceptional. This has got to be my favourite D-pad amongst all the controllers I've used. I feel like I can play beat-em-ups all day and not get any blisters. Most of the emulators I tried also worked without any setup. Here's Streets of Rage on MD.emu. This used to be one of my favourite games alongside Altered Beast. It's still pretty fun to play. Who doesn't love a good platformer? Here's New Super Mario Bros. On DraStic. Monster Hunter Freedom Unite on PPSSPP, another one of my all-time favourites. The SHAKS S5i works really well with this emulator. Here we have Pizza Boy GBA playing Metroid Fusion. This is also a good game to show you how the function key on the controllers work. So in the SHAKS Gamehub, go to Settings, then Function Key Settings. You can see that you can set various things to the function key, but in this example I'll show you how turbo works. Simply keep the button selected for which you want the turbo to work with. In this case I'll just keep button B selected for fire. Once done, tap OK and go back to your game. So now if I press B, it will fire once, If I press and hold it, it also just fires once. So if I wanted to fire multiple times, I would have to keep tapping the fire button, which can obviously get tiring for someone lazy like me. So to get around that, simply press the function button. You'll see the third LED turn on, indicating the function is activated. Now look what happens when I press and hold the fire button. It continues to fire in bursts. Pretty useful, right? You can see how this would come in handy. As with most Bluetooth controllers, all games that support controllers natively will work without any setup or additional software, but if you want to play games which don't support controllers, you'll have to use the Shaks Gamehub app. In order to map keys to the on-screen button, you'll need to put the controller into mapping mode using the slider on the left of the controller, then pair it as we did earlier. You'll need to remove the previous pairing to be able to pair again in mapping mode. It's annoying, but it's what needs to be done. Unfortunately, my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 2 isn't currently working in mapping mode, as you can see here. I've spoken with the Shaks representative who says they're aware of this and working on a fix. So in order to show you how the mapping mode works, I'll have to switch to my Sony Xperia 1. In the Shaks app, go to mapping, add the game you want to play from the scrollable list. Annoyingly, there's no way to search for a title, so you'll have to scroll to find the game you want. I've already got COD on my registered list, so once you've registered it, just tap on the game and press OK. Once it starts and you have the on-screen buttons showing, tap the Shaks icon. On the controller, move the stick or press the button you want to map. So when I move the left stick, you can see that's just appeared here on the screen. Just move that over to where you want it and then just do the same for all the other buttons you want to map. It's very straightforward and easy to do. After you're done, save your mapping and you're done. As you can see, the mapping software works very well. COD is of course a first-person shooter. It's a genre that benefits from accurate and precise analog sticks. Like I mentioned earlier, the analog sticks aren't the best I've used, but it's good enough to get a decent gaming experience in COD Mobile without being frustrating. Also, remember that function mode I demonstrated with Metroid Fusion earlier? It doesn't seem to work in mapping mode. COD is one of those games that would have benefited from it. Being able to put weapon fire into turbo or burst mode would have reduced recoil by a fair bit. As I mentioned earlier on, this controller features dual vibration motors for haptic feedback. I've not come across any Android games that support the rumble feature, so I haven't been able to test it there, but when I played games on Windows, the rumble feature definitely worked. As an example, on Burnout Paradise, every time you crash or scrape anything or even go over a different surface like grass, it'll vibrate, so it does indeed feel more immersive. The vibration motors aren't as powerful as what you might be used to with console controllers, but it's strong enough to improve your gaming experience. It isn't something I've seen on other Bluetooth controllers, and it's no gimmick here, it does really help improve the game. The device features Bluetooth 4.1. It's not the latest standard, but connectivity has been really good for me. You can use the controller about 7 to 10 meters away from the connected device, and I've had no disconnections in my experience. The only annoying thing is that you have to unpair and then pair again every time you want to connect through a different mode, but it's better than some other controllers where you have to activate via the PC to get into different modes. So definitely a plus in that area. In terms of input lag, although I didn't perform any scientific tests to measure it, just from playing various games, there wasn't any noticeable lag, so there isn't anything to worry about in that area. Shaks states the controller will last around 8 hours. My experience with the controller suggests that's certainly accurate. 8 hours might not seem like a lot, but it will most likely outlast your phone's battery. In my opinion, that's more than enough. If the battery does die, it will only take about an hour to fully charge, so it's fairly fast compared to other controllers. Overall, after the GLAT Play controller, this is by far the best controller I've used. It works with all types of games and services, and I love how easy it is to switch between different modes via the slider. There's no activation required to play in mapping mode, and it works with various platforms. It even works on Windows over Bluetooth. I've used other Bluetooth controllers where you have to be tethered to use with Windows, so this feature is definitely welcome. All the buttons on this controller are very tactile. In fact, including the D-pad, I think all the face buttons feel really great. The analog sticks aren't completely free of dead zone. There's some bias in the 4 directions, but it doesn't seem to be noticeable when you're playing games that rely heavily on them. All the face buttons are evenly placed out. They're not crammed together, but in some sense that's also a double-edged sword, because at first it does feel a little uncomfortable playing for extended periods because your hands end up quite far apart from each other. It does take a little getting used to, but once you do, you'll love this controller. So on that basis, I definitely recommend this. If you're interested, I'll place the link to the product page in the description below. This has been Raju Rahman from Tectonic. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and it helped you, please subscribe and like. That would really help me out. And don't forget to check out these other videos too.